Hello, my name is Janet Creighton. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Specialist for the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. Today, September 13th, we're doing a special cahrc partner briefing, a webinar on emerging labor issues. Today, we're talking to the Ontario Immigration Nominee Program, and we're discussing their new high-demand stream that includes farm and food workers.
So I really want to thank the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration here in Ontario for quickly pulling this together for farm and food stakeholders here in Ontario. And thank Philip, Louisa, and Susan Hasty, who's on the call. And I believe the webinar is being recorded. Suzanne can confirm that. And there will be question and answer with time for feedback to the provincial officials after the call. So thank you very much for everyone for joining. We have over 30 participants, and I'm going to hand this over to the director, Suzanne Hasty, at this point.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Janet. I appreciate the introduction. I am Suzanne Hasty. I'm the director of the Business Immigration and Selection Branch, and we operate the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. Just so you know who I have in the room with me here, I've got Louisa Cornea, who's our team lead in the OINP. I've got Dave Wood, who's a team lead, and also has been responsible for a lot of the technical development around our online systems. And Dave is a great resource if individuals have any questions about how our systems are working online. And I think if time permitting, Dave will hopefully be able to take us through a brief walkthrough of what people can expect when they go online to apply, and just provide some helpful hints. I also have Michael Reed, who is our Assistant Deputy Minister of our Immigration Selection Branch. So want to thank them for joining me here today, and thanks to Janet for taking the time to help us organize this session. We're really looking forward to being able to provide some additional information on this new stream that was just launched back on October 15th. So really excited to be here today. I'm going to caution people. I've got a bit of a head cold, so if you hear someone with severe sinus congestion, that is me. And if worse comes to worse and I lose my voice during this, Louisa's agreed to pitch in. So we've got a good resource team here. As Janet indicated, we are recording this session, and there is the opportunity for questions and answers. The one thing I will say about the question period, if we're able to respond very quickly to a question, we're happy to do it. If the question is maybe more of a technical nature or something we need to follow up on, we would just beg your indulgence on that. We'll take those questions away. We'll get the answers to those questions and then feed them back to the participants through Janet. Janet, is that okay by you?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Perfect. That's great. So I'll move in with the presentation. Just a little bit by way of background before I jump into the presentation. The presentation will focus predominantly on the criteria for our new in-demand skills stream, and it'll also focus on the application process. So it'll be a very pragmatic overview of what the criteria is and how one applies to the program. Just a little bit by way of background. As I said, this is a new stream for the program. It was introduced very recently in the middle of August, and it was introduced in response to what we were hearing from stakeholders in Ontario about the need for an immigration pathway for low and semi-skilled occupations, particularly those in the agriculture and in the construction sectors. And this program was developed in response to those needs by ourselves in partnership with the federal government. As you know, immigration is the authority of the federal government, and the provincial nominee programs exist under their mandate. So everything we do is in partnership with the federal government. I'm going to proceed to the next slide. Hold on one second here. Okay, there we go. So as I said, we're here today to talk about our new stream. That's the employer job offer in-demand skilled stream. The first slide that I'm going to focus on is, as I said, I want to talk a little bit about the application process. And I am going to pause during the presentation just to give people a chance to sort of absorb what they're looking at. And if they do have any questions, to either forward those to us or to make note of any questions such that we can respond to those later in the presentation. So as I said, we do have an online application system. Actually, all of our programs as of September 7th are now available online. We've been moving from a paper-based application system through the beginning part of this year towards online application. This has been really beneficial for the program. It's a far more efficient way for us to process applications, and it's much more, I think, user-friendly for our applicants in that you can proceed very easily from one page to the next in the application process, upload documents, and also you're able to check online the status of your application as it proceeds through processing, which is really great. It gives people assurances that their application is moving forward. So as I said, applications are submitted electronically through the OINP e-filing portal, and that's accessed directly through our website. And as I said, if time permitting, Dave will provide a little bit more technical information on that. The applicant will provide information about the employer. Now, what I want to just pause for a moment is to talk about the application process itself. It is the application collects information both on the employer, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about the employer criteria in a moment, as well as the prospective nominee. So again, our applicant is the prospective nominee. We have a dedicated form for the employer to complete. It's accessed through our website, and trying to avoid any technicalities, it's housed on the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services website and forms repository, but you can access that form there. The employer fills that out, provides it to the nominee to upload as part of the application process. So our first step is for the employer to complete the form, and then we move to the online application process. Now, I'm going to speak more about criteria in a moment, but it's important to note that applicants, the prospective nominee, can only apply if they've received a permanent and full-time job offer from an Ontario employer, and also, as I previously indicated, that the employer has provided a complete and signed employer form to upload as part of the application process. So we're collecting information on the employer, and we're collecting information on the prospective nominee. Once the applicant has registered with our system, they've registered a profile, they have 21 days to submit a complete application to the OINP. And a complete application is a complete and paid application. And as I previously alluded to, applicants or their representatives, if you choose to be represented, are able to check the status of their application by logging on to our e-filing portal. And you can check your status anytime. As your application moves through our processing, process, you can check the application. I also just want to take a moment to pause and just advise everyone that the information I'm providing here is much more of an overview. I strongly urge that before anyone proceeds with an application to the program, that they refer to our application guide, which is accessible through our website, and really take the time to review that guide, review it from the perspective of program criteria for both the employer and the applicant. There is information there if individuals choose to use a representative and representatives who are authorized by the program, and other information with respect to declarations and other requirements of the program. So I strongly urge individuals to take the information that they received today and also to review the application guide before submitting an application. So this is, in a nutshell, the application process. And as I said, it is conceived as a partnership between the employer and the prospective nominee, and an application is considered submitted once it's paid. And you can pay online using a credit card. I'm going to move to the next slide, which speaks more about our eligibility criteria. So we've discussed the application process. Now we'll discuss the eligibility criteria for the in-demand skilled streams. So with respect to work experience, the prospective nominee must have 12 months full-time or an equal amount in part-time cumulative work experience in Ontario in an eligible occupation in the last 36 months, and that would be 36 months from the date of application. I'm going to get to the eligible occupations in just a moment. So we are looking for work experience in Ontario. The prospective nominee must also have a job offer in Ontario in, again, an eligible NOC C or D occupation. I'll get to those in a minute. And it must be for a full-time and permanent is defined as indeterminate length, employment in a non-seasonal position. And this is important, I want to emphasize that, a non-seasonal position at the prevailing wage for the position in that part of the particular region of Ontario. I want to stop for a minute and I'll come back to more about the prevailing wage. I'll speak to that a little bit later in the presentation as well, just for individuals who are not familiar as to how to access the prevailing wage for a region in Ontario, because this is important as well. For individuals who are applying in an occupation where certification or licensure is required to work in that occupation, they must be able to demonstrate that they have that certification or licensure. There is a minimal language requirement. Prospective nominees must have a language proficiency at a level of CLB 4 or higher, and that can be in English or French. We also require applicants to be able to demonstrate settlement funds. Applicants must be able to demonstrate that they have a minimal levels of saving or income in Ontario to support themselves and their family members, and I'll expand on that in a moment as well. And in addition, we have minimal education requirements. Prospective nominees must be able to demonstrate that they have a minimal education level equivalent to a secondary school or high school diploma in Canada. And that would be confirmed through an educational credential assessment, and I'll speak a bit more about that as well. And then, as I've said before, we have eligible occupations in the agriculture and construction sector, and I'll get to those in a moment. And applicants can apply from either within Canada or outside of Canada, but as I said earlier, the work experience requirement must be met with an Ontario-based, they must have Ontario-based work experience. And finally, the applicant, the prospective nominee, must demonstrate an intention to reside in Ontario. So I'm just going to pause for a moment there to let people sort of absorb that slide. I've just had a question from someone come through that's saying they don't have any sound. I know we have individuals on the teleconference. I'm just looking at Louisa here to confirm if there's anything that we should be aware of with respect to folks not having sound.
So from our perspective, the sound works. It may be a technical issue from their side. Maybe they can dial into the teleconference.
We just heard from that participant that they're on the phone now. So again, I think that if folks are having trouble hearing anything through the computer, for lack of a better term, we encourage everyone to phone in on the teleconference, where we're kind of looking at dual technology here. So,
hello, Janet here. Is it possible to post the telecon info within the webinar for people that are having trouble with the telecon abilities in Adobe Connect?
Okay, and I'm going to look at my colleagues on that one, Janet, because you're dealing with someone whose technical abilities on this probably rates in the negative numbers. So can we post the telecom information quickly, guys?
I'm going to write it down in big. I'm not sure how to enter text into the teleconference.
Okay.
But I'm going to write it down on a piece of paper in big text that you can hold up so people will be able to see it.
Oh, in the little corner here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to do that. Well, actually, this is it right here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go old school here, folks. Hold on, Louisa's changing everything around on me here. Bear with us for a moment, folks. All right, okay, so just go. All right, hold on a second here. I'm going to try and hold this up. My apologies. And can people see that on the screen? Janet, can you see that on the screen?
No, we can't see it on the screen. I was just wondering if they could put it in the chat box. That might work.
Oh, is there a chat box there?
Oh, okay. Hold on. Louisa's going to do that. I'm just going to shift out of the camera for a moment. All right. We appreciate your patience here, folks. I just want to let people know this is the first time we've done this. So there we go. All right. So what are we doing here, Louisa?
I will email.
Yeah, we see the PowerPoint. We don't see a screen.
Okay, perfect then. You're seeing the PowerPoint because that's what's on the screen. Okay. Are you emailing this?
Yes, so I will email Anna, who is our contact and is logged in through the webinar.
Okay, and she
will be
can.
posting, yes.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to ask a colleague to post the teleconference information, and just bear with us. We just need a couple of seconds to do that, and then we should be off to the races. Okay. All right. Okay. In the meanwhile, I'll just leave the we'll just move on to the eligible NOC codes, just to move forward in the presentation. I'll pause for a moment just to give Louise an opportunity to send that email. And we'll ask Anna, who is another colleague that we have working with us, to post that information.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to switch between screens.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we've emailed Anna. Hopefully we'll have that up in a moment or two. I will continue with the presentation. I'm just conscious of time. Hopefully if anybody needs any additional information, or if they feel they've missed anything, as I said, they can certainly email Janet and forward any questions over to us, and I'm happy to answer those. So as I indicated with respect to the program criteria, we do have eligible NOC codes specific to this screen. To this stream. The NOC codes are listed on the slide that you're looking at right now. The program at this point in time is limited to specific NOC codes in the construction and agriculture sectors. You'll see that we are looking at general farm workers, nursery and greenhouse workers, harvesting laborers, and related industries with butchers and meat cutters. And then the other NOC codes are specific to the construction sector. So I've just seen that the conference call information has been posted. I've just seen it's come up. Conference call information is in the chat box, and I'm hoping that everybody can call in. I'll leave this slide up for a moment just so that folks can call in before I move on to the next slide. Okay, we'll just wait to hear the acknowledgement on our Polycom unit here. Okay. I'll move forward with the deck. One of the things that we did want to touch on was the eligibility criteria for Ontario employers. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there is program criteria for the employer and program criteria relevant to the prospective nominee. In the chart that I reviewed in 2 slides previous to this, I went over the criteria for the prospective nominee. We've touched on the eligible NOC codes, and now I'd like to take a moment to just review the eligibility criteria for Ontario employers. So as we've noted before, applicants to this stream must have a job offer in Ontario for a full-time and permanent employment, and it must be in a non-seasonal position at the prevailing wage for that position in the particular region of Ontario. The employer must have been an active business, then could be a corporation, limited partnership, or sole proprietorship for at least 3 years. They have to have a business premises in Ontario where the prospective nominee will work, and the employer must be in compliance with all provincial labor laws. Now, for employers inside the Greater Toronto Area, and I'm not too sure how many of individuals on the phone this would relate to, the employer must be able to demonstrate a minimum of $1 million in gross annual revenue for the most recent fiscal year, and must be able to demonstrate that they have 5 permanent and full-time employees who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents at the location where the applicant will work. For those outside of the Greater Toronto Area, the employer must have a minimum of $500,000 in gross annual revenue, again for the most recent fiscal year, and 3 permanent and full-time employees who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents at the location where the applicant will work. So again, we have criteria for the applicant, the prospective nominee, and criteria for the employer. Speaking more now specifically to the position to be filled, as I've said before, the position must be permanent and full-time, and we define permanent and full-time as a position that consists of a minimum of 1,560 or 1,560 hours of paid employment in a minimum 12-month period with a minimum of 30 hours per week. So that's a full-time job under our program criteria. Again, the position must be in an eligible occupation, and I referenced those 2 slides ago. The position must meet wage criteria, and that is the prevailing wage level in Ontario for that occupation in the region where the individual will be employed, where the employer is operating their business. If the applicant is already working in the position, the employer is required to demonstrate that they are paying a wage equal to or greater than the prevailing wage for the occupation in that region of Ontario. So again, minimal requirement is the prevailing wage, and if the applicant is already working for the employer, again, they must demonstrate that they're paying the prevailing wage or higher. Now, in order to ascertain what the prevailing wage is for that particular position in Ontario, individuals access the job bank, and I'm just looking at Louisa to confirm that, and then they would enter in the particular NOC code, the position, the occupation name, and the region in Ontario where the individual will be employed, and they'll be able to get that information that way. Again, as I mentioned before, when individuals are applying to our program and referencing our application guide, appropriate links and additional information on all of this criteria is available in our application guides. And as I said, the links are there to direct you to the job bank or other resources that you might need in order to finalize an application. I referenced earlier that the employer must be compliant with all provincial labor legislation, and that the position must not affect the settlement of any labor dispute or affect the employment of a person involved in a labor dispute. The position must not impact or affect employment or training opportunities for Canadian citizens or permanent residents. For those individuals or for those employers who are looking to recruit an individual from overseas, we do require that the employer indicate that they have undertaken recruitment efforts, that is, that they've attempted to recruit a Canadian citizen or permanent resident initially. And as I said, when you look at the application guide, the requirements for recruitment efforts are clearly articulated in the guide. And then finally, the position must be necessary for the company's operations. And I'll leave that slide up for a moment. So just to reiterate and bring everyone back, we have criteria specific to the applicant or the prospective nominee, and the prospective nominee is the applicant for the purposes of this program. And then, in addition, we have specific eligibility for the employer. And that's why, as I mentioned in the overview, that we require the employer to first complete an employer form, and that form lays out all the eligibility criteria for the employer and also the criteria that's required for the position as well. All that information is there. And additional information on how to apply, how the employer can apply, better understanding of this criteria is provided in our application guide. I will move on to the next slide now. We've taken the opportunity just to provide a handful of slides to provide some additional information on some of the experience or some of the criteria that we've already discussed. It may be a little bit repetitive, but we just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to absorb what the criteria is, so that those individuals who are interested in the stream and are thinking of potentially applying under the stream fully understand the requirements of it. So again, with the work experience, I did indicate earlier that the applicant, the prospective nominee, must be able to demonstrate that they have 12 months of cumulative work experience. 1, obtained within the last 3 years or 36 months from the date of application, that it is full-time work or the equivalent part-time, that it is paid work. Volunteer work and unpaid internships are not eligible under the program. The work must be obtained in Ontario, and again, we go back to the fact that the work experience must be in an eligible NOC code under this program. Now, again, we have articulated that individuals who are in a position or occupation that requires licensing or certificate must have a valid certificate or license at the time of application. I've also mentioned that for the purposes of our program, we define full-time work as 1,560 hours of work obtained in less than a 12-month obtained in a 12-month period. Anything obtained in less than 12 months does not qualify. And for those, only work experience acquired after becoming qualified to work in that occupation will qualify. So you have to be qualified to work in that particular occupation in order to have that work experience count or be eligible for the purposes of the program. The exception is if that work experience was gained as part of an apprenticeship program, and if it was paid. Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide. So that provides a little bit more background on work experience, and as I said, all of this is laid out in our application guide. Certification, I've mentioned licensing and certification a few times during the presentation. As I've said, applicants must hold the mandatory license or certification from the Ontario College of Trades if they have worked or are currently working in an occupation in Ontario that requires a license or certification. And obviously, applicants must be able to provide proof that they do hold that license or certification. I think that's fairly self-evident. With respect to language proficiency, I did indicate earlier that applicants, the prospective nominee, must meet a Canadian language benchmark, a CLB-4, or above in all language competencies. This is reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and this can be in English or French. Now, there are designated institution or testing agencies that are acceptable to the program, and we have 3 of those agencies by which we will accept the results of language tests. We have the International English Language Testing, IELTS. This is for general training and testing only. We have the Canadian English Language Proficiency Index Program, or CELPIC, and for Francophone, Test d'Evaluation des Français for French testing. So we have 3 agencies by which individuals, prospective nominees, or the applicant can have their language testing or can undertake their language testing. I do want to provide a bit of a proviso on this. Our language test results must not be older than 24 months at the time of application. So we want a sense of currency with respect to the language test. And again, there's more information on language testing in our application guide. Want to move on to education. I also mentioned this when we provided the overview of the requirements for the prospective nominee. Again, applicants must have the equivalent of a secondary school, that is a high school level of education. If the applicant's studies were completed outside of Canada, the applicant must obtain an educational credential assessment or an ECA report by a designated organization that indicates that the applicant's foreign education is equivalent to a high school diploma. There's information in our application guide of agencies that will provide an ECA report. It is important that the applicant provide the authority for the program to validate that report when they apply. And similar to our language testing, we do have a window for validity on an ECA report. The ECA report must not be older than 5 years at time of application. And again, as I said, there's more information on that in our application guide. Settlement funds. I did discuss settlement funds. Settlement funds are a requirement of our program to demonstrate that the prospective nominee, that the applicant can support themselves and their family or any dependent family members that are coming with them, and that they can support themselves and their family members. All applicants must possess sufficient settlement funds or sufficient funds and/or income in Ontario to cover settlement costs for themselves and their dependent family members. And the minimum level of settlement funds are based on the low income cutoff, or LICO. This is set by the federal government and is adjusted annually and adjusted to family size. We provide a link in our application guide so that the applicant can reference the current LICO amounts and can determine what their LICO requirements will be based on the family size or the number of individuals who are being covered through the application. To demonstrate that individuals meet this requirement, applicants must submit copies of 6 months of their most recent bank statements to demonstrate that they have sufficient settlement funds, and they may also submit evidence of ongoing employment in Ontario in an eligible occupation, or that they have a job offer, a valid job offer in an eligible occupation. So again, the ability to be able to demonstrate either settlement funds or employment is critical with respect to our eligibility criteria for the applicant. That basically covers my overview of the program. I think we took the opportunity to discuss the application process. It is an online system. It does require the employer as well as the prospective nominee to be active, for lack of a better term, in the application process. We do have employer-specific criteria, which we have outlined in the presentation, and certainly individuals have the slide deck and they can use that for reference purposes. And again, we have specific criteria that the prospective nominee or the applicant must also be able to demonstrate. When you look at our application guide, that will provide additional information on the criteria that I provided the overview here today, and will also provide information on any supporting documentation that an applicant and or the employer must provide so that we can validate that the applicant meets program criteria and that the employer meets program criteria as part of our application processing, as part of the processing of the application. Okay, great. Yeah, we're starting to get some questions here. I think some people forwarded some questions during my presentation. I appreciate Dave providing the website to go through and just a few hints on particularly the fact that you don't have to complete the application all at once. One of the things that we have here is what are the timelines of an application? How long? I think we can look at that from two different perspectives. One is, I think Dave has said, be prepared to set aside a few hours in order to complete the application. It's really critical that people first read the application guide and that they understand what the requirements are before they proceed to the actual website or the online application filing system. And then, as Dave said, once you're in there, it usually takes about 3 to 4 hours, but you don't have to complete it all at once. I think if you're referring more to what's the processing time under this stream, we are currently publishing our processing times for our different streams on our website. You can access that. Considering the fact that this stream was just recently introduced, we don't have the data available at this time to be able to project what the processing times are. But if you do visit our website, I think you'll get a sense from our other streams as to what our average is. I think on average for our other job offer stream that we have, we're processing in about 60 to 90 days. So if we use our other job offer stream as a bit of a proxy, that's what we're doing. But I do want to caution that the stream is new, and as we have more robust information, we'll be able to process that or to put that forward. Oh, one thing Dave has just told me, which is very important with respect to the application process, and I did mention this in the earlier. If you're looking at periods of time, it is important to remember that you have 14 days from the date that you complete the registration to submit a paid application. Sorry, 21 days. Okay, I've got we have 14 days on some streams and 21 on this. 21 days to submit a paid application. And again, that's in our application guide. I have another question that says, are NOC B occupations eligible? No, not under this stream. However, NOC B occupations are eligible under our other job offer stream. We have a job offer stream that has been with our program, long-standing stream with our program. It was recently introduced online, I believe at the end of May. That stream came back, was introduced online. It's a very similar application process to this, in that the employer is required to complete a form, and we envision a joint employer and prospective nominee process. And NOC B as well as NOC O and A are eligible under that stream. We also have under our express entry stream a specific stream for the skilled trades in NOC B. So that is another opportunity for individuals in the NOC B occupation. One, a job offer stream, and then secondly, our express entry stream. For those individuals who are... Yes, hi.
Hi, it's Janet here.
Hi.
I wondered if Conestoga had a further follow-up question regarding this, because they had a comment regarding the retail butchers, which is NOC B.
Yep.
Is Pauline on the line? Is Pauline or Adam on the line?
Yeah, I'm here. With regards to that, are you referring to possibly joining them both, eventually creating a stream that will be for retail butchers NOC B as well as NOC C?
I think it's very premature to be able to even be able to sort of project where these streams might go. I think at this point in time, our program is structured with these separate streams such that we have the 2 streams under our job offer, and then again, an opportunity for skilled trades under express entry. I think it'd be very premature to project where the program might go in the future. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, as I said, there are opportunities for NOC B occupations under our different program streams. And again, if you would access our website, look at the application guides for express entry skilled trades and job offer for our other job offer stream, which focuses on OINP. You'll be able to get a sense of the requirements there. We have a question. If you have a current employee that you would like to nominate, does the potential employee have to be in the same NOC to be eligible? Then the answer would be that for this particular program, as I indicated, because of the work experience requirements, they would have to be able to demonstrate that they have 12 months of cumulative work experience in an eligible NOC code in the 36 months prior to the date of application. There's another question here that goes to the LICO. What is the minimum amount for a single applicant if they have no family? Oh my goodness, off the top of my head, I don't know if I know it. I think I'd have to access LICO to be able to say that confidently. Louisa is flipping through the application guide, but I think we've intentionally not specified the amounts in our application guide because LICO amounts will change on an annual basis. So we prefer that the applicant actually access the LICO site itself and make the determination from there. So unfortunately, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but you can access it through the LICO site. Hold on a second. Dave, do you have something?
I'm going to try to see if I can find it online.
It's around $12,000.
About $12,000. We have another question. This is a good one. If an applicant is successful, will they get permanent residency? That's actually a very good question. I would characterize our program as sort of a first step towards permanent residency. The individual, once nominated from us, does have to proceed to the federal government to finalize the application process. Okay, sorry about this. The LICO amount is $12,300 for a single individual. So just to return to the process for permanent residency. So as I said, an individual will be nominated by the province for permanent residency. They are still required to proceed to IRCC in order to finalize the application process. At that time, they will be checking medical, they will be checking security, and I'm looking at Louisa because there's a third one.
No, there's only medical and security.
Only medical and security. So yes, the answer to that is no. There's no guarantee that they will be successful in obtaining permanent residency. They will have to be able to demonstrate that they can pass, for lack of a better term, the medical requirements and the security check. There's a question about how long this program will last. It is a pilot program at this point in time. We are anticipating that the program will continue for an indeterminate length. We will be monitoring, reviewing the program as it moves forward, and we'll be making any adjustments that we have to make. With respect to any updates on the program, I would advise people to monitor our website. We try to be very responsive by ensuring that any changes to our program, any updates are updated immediately, both on our our program website, as well as getting those into Facebook, acknowledging that some people are looking at social media as well.
Hello, Janet here again. I just have one point to introduce, and it's related to meat processing again. Is there challenges in order to qualify for the program? They will have to be renewing their LMIAs. So they're basically, it's like to qualify for your program, it will take a second year. So that's I guess a little bit of feedback that we've been getting from stakeholders. So like 1 year isn't enough in order to access the program due to other regulations with the federal government.
Okay, that's I appreciate that point being raised, because that's something that we can definitely take back, and I appreciate being made aware of that. Thank you very much for that. I'm just looking at these questions, so I'm just going to, exactly. I've got the issue here about the LMIA, so that's been acknowledged.
There was one more point that we would like to make in regards to one question that we were asked earlier about the work experience. In terms of the work experience, it must be in the same NOC, which is the National Occupational Classification, as the intended occupation. So, for instance, if the job offer is in a NOC 8611 harvesting laborers, then the work experience for 1 year in the last 3 years must be in the harvesting laborers 8611 NOC.
Yeah. Thank you. That's an important clarification to make, and I appreciate that. Got an interesting question here. As an employer, do we have to fill out the form for every applicant, or once we've created a profile, can we reuse that information? At this point in time, I'm going to turn to Dave just to answer that question.
At this point in time, no. We do require the employer to fill out that form every time. The information may be quite common throughout that form, so it shouldn't be too arduous on the employer to fill it out the second, third time, et cetera, et cetera. But because of the way the system is set up right now, they will have to submit it multiple times. Although that has been a comment that has been mentioned to us in the past, and we are in a process where we are looking at improvements on a year-by-year basis, and that may be one of the things that we look to for future iterations.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. It's a very good one, and I think, as Dave said, some of this feedback is very good for us as we're looking at making improvements to the program over time. We've got a question here about settlement funds. Can the applicant demonstrate equity in property overseas that can count towards the minimum requirement? I'm going to turn to Louisa, if I could, on that one, just to respond, if we don't mind. Thanks.
So the answer would be no. The settlement funds must be available, transferable, and ready for the applicant to economically establish themselves in Canada.
Yeah, so I think, in other words, any documentation that the applicant provides with respect to settlement funds has to be, the applicant must be able to demonstrate that those, for lack of a better term, those assets, I'm thinking here about mutual funds or whatever the case may be, can be readily converted to cash, for lack of a better term. I've got a question on the cost of an application. Louisa.
Yes, so if the applicant has a job offer from an employer in the GTA, then the cost of the application is 2,000 Canadian dollars. And then if the employer is outside of the GTA, the job offer is outside of the GTA, then the cost would be $1,500.
Got a question here. Just with agri-food as a priority, will retail butchers remain a priority as well? And I think, again, it's too early in the stages of the program. As I said, it is a pilot program. It's just been recently launched to be able to project what we might see in the future. But certainly I do recognize that question, and it's something that we can be cognizant of moving forward. And as I said, any updates to the program moving forward in the longer term will be posted on our website.
Janet here again.
Thank you.
Regarding the question regarding the retail butchers.
Yeah.
I think that it's within the current system, it's in one of the other streams that you're referring to. However, because it isn't recognized as high demand, they're never getting drawn. That's the feedback we're getting from stakeholders.
Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you for that. We'll take that back. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Appreciate that
Could we,
feedback.
Janet here again, is it possible, could we open it up to the telecon, like the conference call here, if anybody has questions from the floor?
Sure, no problem. And the other questions that I have here that have come forward from people on the webinar, my understanding is that we can take these questions out of the webinar session, and if we don't get to them in the minute time that we have remaining, we'll provide written comments on those or written feedback on those through Janet.
Fantastic. That sounds great, Suzanne. Any questions from the floor then?
Hi, Janet.
Can you hear me?
Hi. It's Susan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know, because it's a new program, I know it's a pilot. Are there going to be, is there an allotted number of spots for this program that you see? Because there's a lot of criteria here, and our workers won't be prepared, like with all the language certificates, possibly with savings, in order to apply. So do you know if there going to be an allotted number in this pilot, and if it'll be repeated?
We monitor all of our streams with respect to our overall nomination allocation of 6,000. And that's why you've seen probably some of our streams will sometimes be paused so that we can process applications and then reopen. So we do monitor the activity on our various streams with respect to our overall nomination allocation of 6,000. That's as far as I'm going on that. Any other questions?
Sorry, can I sort of tack on to that question? With regards to accepting 6,000, is there a breakdown of what each profession will be? How many are accepted? So, for example, how many in the construction stream? How many in the agri stream? How many in the meat processing stream?
No, there isn't. Any other questions?
Janet
Yeah,
here,
Murray here.
Go ahead, Murray.
Okay, yes. The question I have, this might be more of a policy thing, but the prevailing wage calculations, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay, yeah. The prevailing wage calculation, why is that necessary when we could just follow the provincial minimum wage? Can anybody explain that? Or can you take that forward to reconsider that there is no need to have that calculation and follow the minimum wage? We do have a disparity between our minimum wage and what we have to pay our incoming labor.
We're happy to take that back, actually. I think you're right. I think that's a much larger question with broader implications. So we're happy to take that back. And I appreciate you raising that point, and it is something that we can take back.
Hi, it's Pauline from Conestoga. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Question that I have too is we have industrial butchers, and so knowing this is a pilot program, I mean, how long can we expect this pilot to be running? Because we have people, for example, who will reach their 1 year in May of 20, and we're just really trying to understand whether this is.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. As I said before, I mean, right now, the pilot is of an indeterminate length. We are continuing to monitor the response to the pilot. We'll make any adjustments that we need to make to the program moving forward. I just don't have that information, that level of specificity at hand right now to be able to give a definitive answer on that. But it is something that we can definitely take back with respect to the conversations that we have within the ministry. Any other questions?
And then I have another question, which is if we went through that year period and, in fact, did not have another successful LMIA, so the individuals had to go home, but they have 1 year of experience, would we still be able to nominate them from their home country as part of this program?
Yes. Yes, the applicant does not necessarily have to be in Ontario or Canada for an application to come forward. So if they have the 12 months work experience and the 36 months from the point of time of application, and for whatever reason they did have to go home, they can still apply.
And so it's not dependent on having an LMIA specifically?
No.
Just to confirm them, that is a change, correct?
There was a question there. Is that a new change?
The LMIA?
Hello?
So I think that we're trying to figure out the question itself. If the requirement for an LMIA is required if they're overseas for the position that's being put forward, is that the question? It may be that it's easy.
I can give an example if you'd like.
Yeah, it may be easier to talk about some examples because there's a lot of gray areas that can exist in those sorts of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of interference on this line for some reason. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
But in the case of a seasonal agricultural worker, their work visas will expire December 15th.
Okay.
So if they submitted an application and they checked all the other boxes, but they were out of the country when that application was being processed, then can a proxy person act on their behalf for communication with the ministry?
You know what I think might be easiest is this might be a question for you. If you could send this question to me as an email, then we can go in and look at the specifics and really give you a concrete answer. There's like, without all of the information in front of us, you wouldn't want to get an answer that sort of creates policy where there was none. So if you can send us an email with the details of that example, we can give that response to a hypothetical application so you guys have a better idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through an application and was rejected afterwards after they'd collected the individual's application fees and told he didn't apply because he was having his LMIA expired.
Okay, so what if you could send that question with the specifics to me, david.wood@ontario.ca. I'll get a response back, and then we'll share that with the group. Okay.
Thank you.
So Janet here, this has been a special review for CAHRC partners, but we want to continue working with your ministry, and we'll be looking for more opportunities for consultation going forward.
Yeah, great.
And guys, I'll just chirp in on that front. If you guys are experiencing the e-filing system, you're having issues, or you have comments about how useful it is, how well you can use it, confusing parts, please send me those comments. We're in a state now where we're looking at ways that we can improve the experience and the interface. So any comments that you might have, assume that other people are experiencing the same difficulties, send them along to me, and we'll put those into the list of things to look at improvements.
And we were talking about circulating the questions that came through on the webinar that haven't been answered. In addition to that, people could email me here at CAHRC, and I can collect if there's any other additional questions that we don't have time to get to. I will send that to the departments as well.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, speaking on behalf of us here with the program, thank you very much for those of you who attended today. I hope you found this informative and that it provided a little bit more context with respect to this new program. And we look forward to hearing from you, Janet. Thank you very much for organizing today.
Well, thanks to your team again for putting this